Our next speaker is April DeValkenaere, owner of Fortress Financial Education, LLC. You may remember April if you participated in our conference series last year. April is a skilled in white-collar criminal analysis, investigations, trainings, and consulting. She is also an experienced certified paralegal through the State Bar of Wisconsin. April began in the Waukesha County District Attorney's Office in 2014 as a paralegal specializing in white-collar crime. She has served on the Wisconsin Attorney General's Coordinated Community Response Team since 2019, and locally she participates in the Waukesha County Financial Abuse Specialist Team. The AARP and the FINRA Investment Education Foundation recently published 2 studies addressing the challenge of chronic fraud victimization and blame and shame in the context of financial fraud. April participated as a subject matter expert in both. In May of 2021, April was recognized by the National Center on Elder Abuse as a WEAAD warrior for teaching law enforcement how to investigate white-collar and elder financial exploitation cases as an adjunct professor. Thank you, April. It's all yours.
Great, Tiffany. Thank you very much. I appreciate being here today, and I'm going to share my screen so that you can see the presentation. Now, are you seeing the full screen, just as a clarification point?
We're good.
Okay, thank you. All right, so thank you again for having me today. I appreciate it. And today we're actually going to talk about how to protect yourself from trusted abusers. So for those of you that started off earlier this morning with the FTC, that's a great presentation in regards to scams. And typically scams are conducted by people who you're not familiar with. This presentation is going to be more focused on people that you are familiar with. So first and foremost, I just wanted to touch base with you and let you know that I do have a disclaimer because I am a certified paralegal. I am not an attorney. So the State Bar of Wisconsin requires me to give you a disclaimer just telling you that I am not an attorney. So please do not construe anything I say today as legal advice, and then we'll move on from there. So what I wanted to share with you today is a lot of people do not realize that some studies have shown that a number of the scams that occur that the FTC was just talking about, the grandparent scam, the romance scams, all of those types of things are a significant number in occurrence. The problem is that they may only represent 10% of the actual financial exploitation of older adults. Some studies have found that up to 90% of older adult financial exploitation actually occurs by someone you know and trust, and 60% of those actually typically are family members. And so that's part of what we want to talk about today. We want to make sure that you know how to protect yourself from people you may already trust. So some of the things that we're going to talk about today, and I'm going to try not to overlap too much with what regards to Chris and Matt had talked about with the scams versus the fraud, but just so you understand the difference between the two, and then how to identify who a trusted abuser could be, and then again, resources available for you to prepare and express your own opinions, and then how to prevent future exploitation. And then again, how to report it. So some of the different things that we may want to just identify in some of this, if it's repetitive, I apologize, but essentially the difference between a scam and a fraud. So the scams are typically a scheme that's involving some type of money or business transactions, and it typically occurs over the phone, over email, online, or in person. The fraud implies intentional deception, and it's generally based on the breach of confidence or trust. So a serious criminal crime and violation of civil law can occur when a fraud occurs. So some of these are repetitive from the FTC section, but just so that you kind of get an idea, we have those imposter scams where somebody's identifying themselves as, someone from Microsoft, like Matt and Chris had talked about, but it could also be someone from a utility company. So WeEnergies, or the cable company area, whether that's Comcast or Time Warner Cable or what have you. And then you have the online shopping and negative reviews. You have prizes and sweepstakes lotteries like the Jamaican Lottery, internet services such as the Microsoft one that the FTC had mentioned. And then you also have other phone and mobile services, because now you can actually get scams via text on your phone, which obviously you want to do your best to try to avoid by using those FTC services in the do not call list. Some other scams, though, people don't realize are the healthcare scams, and especially right now because it's open enrollment for Medicare. So you have to be careful that you're actually talking to a valid representative for Medicare or Medicaid, and just making sure that if you're signing up for a new Medicare program, that you're actually talking to someone that is a valid representative. And then there's this business and job opportunities. There's a lot of scammers out there now that are essentially trying to get financial information by offering people positions that don't exist. They're offering jobs that don't exist. Say, hey, look, we've accepted you for this position, but now we need your financial information in order to set up your direct deposit for your paycheck. So those are also some scams that are out there now. Also the investment related scams, vacation, travel, timeshare scams, and then obviously we're always concerned about the privacy, data security, and cyber threats. So we're going to go through this, and if you want to throw this in the chat, if you want to just give us your thoughts as to out of these scenarios that are on the screen. So I'm going to give you probably a minute or so to kind of choose between these, but if you could identify which ones you think are a scam and which ones you think might be a fraud. So the first one is an email saying you won $5 million and you must send your bank details. Is that a scam or a fraud? If you have a caregiver who makes purchases for themselves when they're utilizing their client's card, so maybe your aunt gives her caregiver her debit card to say, hey, I need you to go pick up my prescription at the pharmacy, but she picks up, $20 in cash while she's there. Is that a scam or a fraud? The next one is a pop-up on the computer saying that you're being offered a new job and you need to send your personal details. A power of attorney agent who provides gifts to their own children using the principal's funds. And then a grandchild who agrees to move in with grandpa for free and help perform upgrades to his home so he can stay there instead of having to go to a nursing home. So I'm just curious, I saw a question pop up, and Tiffany, I'm assuming that you are monitoring those. But I'd be curious to see if anybody has any insights or thoughts on number 5. Is that a scam or a fraud? And Tiffany, go ahead with the question.
We just had a comment. My sister was scammed from a job she found on Indeed.
Yes. Okay. And it does happen. It's not uncommon. But I'd be curious if you guys have any thoughts. I will continue on unless, Tiffany, you have any results. I'm curious what people think. Is number 5, is that a scam or a fraud?
If you'd like to put your answer in the Q&A box, we'd appreciate your response.
Absolutely. And then we'll come back to it. So I'll give you all the time to think about it. Maybe you're ready to make a decision yet. Maybe you want some more information. You let me know. All right. So financial scams, and forgive me, I was having a little bit of technical difficulties in the beginning, so I'm not sure if Chris and Matt already went over this, but I wanted to show you why financial scams are so important to talk about. And so these are actually from the FTC, some of these figures. But essentially, we're going to just talk about Wisconsin here for a moment. And these below the map actually tells you the top 10 frauds in the state of Wisconsin. So it starts with those imposter scams and then goes to online and negative review, and then to prizes and lotteries. But these are just the numbers of reports that were filed in recent history. So why do we care about Wisconsin or scams in Wisconsin? I think that you probably all know from the previous session, we care about them because there are so many of them reported. So just in the first half of 2022, there was almost 13,000 reports made that someone was scammed. And in those, it was $37 million worth of losses. And that's only in the state of Wisconsin, which is why we want to talk about it. And then obviously you guys just saw this from Chris and Matt, so I'm not going to belabor the point, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys were all aware. of this information. And it's in the resources at the end of the slides as well. So let's get more into the frauds. So the frauds are those financial abuses where it's illegal, it's unauthorized, it's improper to use an elder's money, benefits, or belongings, their property, their assets, or for the benefit of someone other than that adult. So essentially that fraud is meaning that the funds have or the person utilizing the funds should have a financial or fiduciary responsibility to the older adult, but instead are using it for their own personal use. And whether that's to put gas in their car to go to work, or if that's to pay for their children's tuition at school. Tiffany, go ahead.
April, I wanted to circle back on some of the answers that we received for
Great.
number 5, whether it's a scam or a fraud.
Yes.
Four people had noted that it's probably neither. And one person said it would be fraud potentially if the grandchild used funds for themselves and did not complete the upgrades, and if he was not paying rent or contributing to the household.
Agreed. So I would absolutely agree with the 5 of you that responded. I really appreciate that. And you are all correct. We don't know yet. Okay. There's not enough information there. That grandson could have very good intentions of helping his grandfather out and doing the best that he can to help his grandfather stay in the home. There really is no scam or fraud at that point. It was a matter of, this is the initial scenario, and hopefully things will go well. But those are the scenarios that you have to think about. So if things are going well and things, he's doing updates and he's there, maybe he's not paying rent, but he's helping and he's buying groceries, or he's doing other things, and they've worked out an agreement. The problem becomes is, what if that grandson falls into an addiction problem, or loses his job and starts to use grandpa's money for his own personal benefit. And so that's where we have to watch those things, right? So is it a concern immediately? Absolutely not. It's a grandson trying to do well by his grandfather. But everybody has to make sure that, they're paying attention in case the scenario changes.
Thank you, April. We don't have any more questions at this time, but feel free to add them to the Q&A box as April presents, and we'll get those to her. Back to you.
Thank you. All right. So again, the financial frauds, the reason I wanted to present them and show them to you is because 90% of elder financial exploitation is actually perpetrated by someone that adult knows and trusts, which is why we want to discuss the issues today. So why do we care about them here in Wisconsin? Because in 2021, there was more than $31 million reported to Adult Protective Services, and a significant portion of that was based on family or friends or someone that older adult knew or trusted that was taken from them. So it's a huge, significant number that we need to all be aware of. So this is just a survey essentially done by Wallet Hub and a little bit of comparison. So I wanted to share this with you. So according to Wallet Hub, there's a comparison of all the states in the United States, comparison based on 3 dimensions of elder abuse protection: the prevalence, the resources, and the protection. And I'm curious where you guys think Wisconsin fell in ranking. How does Wisconsin do in protection of elder abuse, in prevalence and resources and protection? You could throw that in the chat. Where does Wisconsin rank 1 through 50? I'll just give it a second so people can throw their numbers in there. And Tiffany, if you could just shout out a couple of them, I'd appreciate it. And if you want to stay on, I'm going to need you for the next slide or two.
Got number 12.
Okay.
In the middle.
Okay.
The middle of the pack, maybe 20th.
Okay. One more. Is there any others?
Number 5.
Okay. So we're going to try it.
Oh, we got more coming in here. Number 10.
Okay, that's okay. Go ahead. What was the next one?
Number 10.
10. Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you, we all did better than that. Okay. Wisconsin ranks number 1 in the Wallet Hub study. Okay. However, I want you to take this into consideration. Wisconsin fell as number 1, which is typically it's good, right? We're at the top of the pack. Where do you think, though, that percentage equates to? So if Wisconsin is doing the best in the country, if we're looking at, for those of us that used to be in school, right? So A through F, we had 0 to 100%. What percentage do you think that we are actually conducting here in Wisconsin? So how often do we provide those prevention techniques, or how often are we out there providing resources?
We're waiting for some answers, so don't be shy to throw those guesses in the Q&A box.
That's okay. I'll move on, but think about it, right? So we're ranked #1 in the country. I see a couple coming in now.
We got some coming in.
So what percentage do you think we're ranked at if we're #1?
Let's get a few more. We have a few. Oh, we got some good ones coming in, April.
Okay, good.
80%, 10%, 100%, another 10% guess.
Okay, great. So take this into consideration. We are #1 in the country. Okay.
65%. Oh, okay. Close.
We ranked at 61%. Okay. But we're ranked #1 in the country, which means everybody else is below us. All right. Is that good or bad? Do we want to celebrate that? That's 61.
Let's put some answers in there. Yes or no? Simple. Got some coming in.
What are they saying so far?
We got a yes. We got 2 no's. Come on. Let's put our guesses in there. You got a 50-50 shot. Yes.
Exactly.
But if we are at 61%, can we do better? Another no. Would like to see a higher number.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys participating. It's really great, considering that we're virtual. So I do appreciate it. And I see that there's still more coming in. So
yep. Yes, better.
Were there comments with those?
Just a yes and a yes, better.
Okay. So should we celebrate the fact that we are #1 in the country? Yes, I think that's a great celebration. However, that 61%, I absolutely would agree. We need to increase that percentage, right? We need to make sure that everybody's aware of what's going on and how do we prevent it from getting worse. So we're going to continue to move on, but please feel free to add questions and comments into the chat, and we'll get those from Tiffany as we move along. Did you have any more before I switch slides?
I had a few no's come in, and then somebody did comment that it was still successful.
It is absolutely still success, right? We still want to celebrate the success. We just want people to realize that we can still do better, right? Because people, and the reason I say that is because there are states all over the country that are looking at Wisconsin in order to lead the pack in this regard. So it's great that Chris and Matt were here for the Midwest region. I think the Midwest, we do a tremendous job out here, but we want to make sure that we're continuing to strive forward and move in more forward progression because other people are looking at us to learn and do the right thing. So more about those trusted abusers. We want to show you a couple different things here. So some of the things that we want to make sure that we're looking out for in a trusted abuser, like I said before, it's someone that you know and trust. It's your family members, it's your caregivers, it's your neighbors, it's your friends. It's someone that you have a trusted relationship with. And at some point, these characteristics might become an issue in your relationship, whether it's possessiveness, extreme jealousy, a bad temper, extremely controlling behavior. Maybe that scenario we gave earlier with a grandson who's with his grandfather. Well, maybe he was never controlling before, but he becomes controlling once he moves in with grandpa. Or maybe they go out in public and he starts to demean that person in public. And those are all red flags that we need to be watching out for and making sure that we're aware of. If they start to show their face, meaning that these characteristics within a particular trusted individual, that you need to be talking to someone else. You need to find another trusted individual that you can rely on to share these concerns with, because you don't want to wait until something happens. You want to address it hopefully before it happens, okay? And the reason that it's important to recognize is because safety is first and foremost. If somebody becomes excessively controlling, or as we talked about in here, if they, they've got a bad temper and they start throwing things, or, they're unpredictable. So maybe they take you to a doctor's appointment and say, hey, I'll come back and pick you up in, a half hour, and they don't show up for 4 hours. Obviously that can turn into a safety issue, especially if maybe you're diabetic or you need to have, insulin or some other type of issue. And it's also important to recognize, because undue influence becomes a huge factor. And for those of you that are not familiar with undue influence, I wanted to make sure that we touch on this. It's essentially something that it happens more readily than we care to admit, but it's also very, very difficult to prove when it comes to prosecution or trying to get something investigated through the justice system. And the reason is because undue influence has to be shared by the victim. So that undue influence, let me just give you a couple of examples. One might be if a daughter of yours becomes your power of attorney. Well, they don't like the way that you're spending your money or what have you. And now they essentially say, hey, look, unless you continue, or you start to give me, whatever, $500 a month, if you don't start cutting me a check like that, I'm not going to let you see your grandkids anymore. And if you are a grandparent that's very involved in your grandchildren's lives, and you go to their sporting events, you go to their basketball games, their football games, or their volleyball games, or whatever the case may be, and now you're being told that your own children won't bring your grandchildren to see you, or won't take you to go see your grandchildren anymore, that's considered undue influence. Another example of undue influence may be if maybe that grandson that lives with his grandfather, maybe the grandfather has a pet. And the grandson threatens to either take the pet to the dog pound, or to leave it outside and not feed it, or whatever the case may be. So those are different things that we want people to make sure that they're recognizing. If you feel like you're being controlled in some fashion like that, especially financially related, that's a huge red flag. That's something that we want to make sure that you find another or a different trusted person to be a good contact for, so that you have someone safe that you can communicate with. And then obviously we want to make sure that we recognize it, because it needs to be reported, whether that's to adult protective services, or if it's financially related to your financial institution, law enforcement, if it's a safety issue. So we just want to make sure that you are recognizing those different aspects. So some of the different things in regards specifically to financial exploitation with the trusted abusers, we want to make sure that sudden changes are not occurring within your bank accounts. So like Chris and Matt had said earlier, you want to make sure that you are checking your bank statements, your credit card statements, your credit reports. Has something changed? Has your power of attorney or your trusted confidant indicated, hey, look, you asked me to help with your financials. Well, I know that you're a member at this financial institution, but this one's closer to my house, so I want to change banks or credit unions with your accounts. Or, if you're starting to look at your bank statements and you notice, hey, look, I asked them to go to Walgreens for me, and I see that on the way home, they went to Costco and spent $200. Those are different things that we need to be taking into consideration. And when you're looking at those, hopefully you're still seeing your bank accounts. I will tell you that we've had a number of cases where our older adult actually no longer had access to their bank statements because their caregiver had taken over their finances, and they had actually changed it from a mailed statement to the house to a online statement. So they never even got their statements physically in the mail anymore. And so we actually had like children who took their parents finally, and they're like, Mom, I can't stand you telling me you can't balance your checkbook anymore because you're not getting your bank statement. So let's just go to the bank on Saturday. And this daughter had actually taken her mom to the bank and found out that the caregiver that was coming to their house, I think it was 4 days a week, had actually changed the banking information to her own and had changed it to online banking. So That's why mom wasn't getting the bank statements anymore. So if you suddenly see that change, you're not receiving the statements in a fashion that you typically would, that's definitely a problem. And you need to get to the financial institution, the bank, the credit union, what have you, as soon as possible. Because the longer you wait, the more theft or fraud that could be occurring. I know in the case that I had just discussed, although our victim was only not able to balance her checkbook for about 3 months. That's how long it took her daughter to finally say, look, Mom, I'm sick of you complaining about this. We're just going to go to the bank and figure out what's going on. And what they thought was only 3 months turned out to be the caregiver had been stealing from them for the 18 months prior. And they had actually opened credit card accounts in their mom's name, and just recently had decided to change those banking statements to her own address and to change it to online banking. But she had actually been thieving from them for almost 1.5 years prior. So the other thing you want to make sure is that if you are receiving notice in the mail of changes, so sometimes the financial institutions will actually now send you a postcard that says, hey, look, you signed up for a new online banking with this email. Well, if you get this postcard in the mail and you realize you don't have a computer, or you see the postcard, it's for your parents and your parents don't have a computer, there's a problem, right? And so we need to figure out who had access and who made these changes. So somebody needs to be going into the financial institution and figuring out, if a caregiver or a grandchild or what have you maybe had reached out and changed some of that banking information. So some of the things that we want to make sure you're aware of, and we don't want you to be offended by, is that say you don't realize anything's going on yet. You don't realize that additional funds are coming out of your account, or you got one of those pop-ups on your screen and you think that you're giving money to pay for a service. We want you to realize that the financial institutions are there to try to help you. And so they are going to potentially ask you when you come in to explain or confirm the transaction. Like if you go in and say, hey, I want to take out $6,000 in cash, and that is not a normal transaction for you, where you may not want to explain it, but maybe there's some undue influence going on in the background, please do not get offended or get upset with the financial institution, the bank, or the credit union employees, because they're really there to help prevent that exploitation, right? So they're going to ask you to tell them what that transaction is for. They're going to ask you, are you sure you want cash? Maybe if you are trying to make a payment, it'd be better to do it with a cashier's check or something like that. And then they may ask you, hey, if you come in with that grandson that maybe is trying to take some money from you, they may say, hey, look, we need to talk to you privately for a moment. Would you come over here in this conference room and sit down and talk with us for a few minutes? Please go with them. Don't get offended. Don't get upset. They're really trying to help protect you. And if there's nothing going on, if this is your grandson and you've brought him in because you've been saving up money to give him towards his college tuition, and he just graduated from high school and he's getting ready to go to school, and this is a normal, not a normal, but an anticipated transaction for you, then you go in the conference room and you explain that to the financial institution and say, hey, look, I've been saving for this for a number of years. This is my goal. This is my intent. My grandson here, he's going to school, and you can tell him what school he's going to and be super excited and share in that joy and happiness for your grandson, and come out and take the money out, and you guys are good as gold. There's no problem there. It's just a matter of they want to make sure that they're helping protect you. So please do not get offended by those questions, and just be aware that they're there to help you. And if you have a concern or a question, that they should be asking these questions and help hopefully alleviate the possibility of that exploitation. So we wanted to also talk about the holder of an account. So a trusted individual now, before this, we were actually talking about a trusted abuser, right? So there has been new legislation that is out there specifically for proposed for investment accounts and financial accounts. But just so you know, it's not yet a requirement, but it's something to be considered. So some financial institutions are already asking people to do this. So what they're asking is for you to put a trusted individual. Now this could be similar to an emergency contact, right? So they're saying, hey, look, we want to put somebody on your account, not necessarily on the account. They wouldn't have access to the account, but they would be a safe person that financial institution can call if they think that you are being exploited, if they think that you are being a victim of a scam or a fraud. They essentially, you are giving the financial institution permission to call this person, this safe person, this emergency contact, however you want to identify it. Some of the financial institutions call them a trusted individual, and say, hey, look, mom's here. She's trying to withdraw $8,000 for a wire transfer to send it to, the state of New York. And I just want to call and make sure, you're aware of it. And, if you have any concerns that, this might be a scam or what have you. Now, are they automatically going to go out the moment you walk into the bank? Are they going to go out and make a phone call? No, they're going to sit there. They're going to ask you those questions. They're going to potentially take you into a room first and have conversations with you. And if they think that it's a fraud or a scam, then they're going to advise you of that first. And if you don't necessarily agree with them, or if they ask you for additional documentation as to, okay, where in New York are you sending this? Who is this person that you're sending it to? If you can provide that information, there's no issue. If you cannot provide that information, that's when they might be reaching out to this trusted individual. Maybe it's a sister-in-law or something that recently had a fire and you're trying to help them out. So there are some valid reasons in order to do this, but essentially it's a safeguard. The financial institution would not be allowed or able to give that trusted individual any other account information. They wouldn't be able to tell them necessarily even which account it's coming from, or how much is in the account, or how often you're doing these transactions. What they're giving them is information specific to this one transaction. Hey, look, we think that this might be part of a Jamaican lottery scam based on the conversations that we've had with mom, and we want to make sure that, is there really a sister-in-law in New York, and is there this family connection? Is there a problem? Is there something that she's really trying to help out with, or is this maybe a scam? So be aware of that. Again, right now it's not a requirement. You are not required to put it on your account, but you can choose to do so at any time. Some financials now are starting to offer it when they update your account. So sometimes financial institutions will ask you to update your account once a year. And so they're asking you now if you want to put a trusted individual on your account. So some of the resources and how to prevent this trusted abuse. And it really depends on the type, the fraud that's occurring. Is it over the phone? Is it email, computer, in-person, trusted individual? It's all going to depend, right? So the answers might be different. So we're going to run through a few different options quickly, and then we're going to get through some other information. But I want to make sure that you have some things to consider, right? So if this is a phone fraud, so if it's someone you don't know, you can obviously just block your number outright. You can change your number. You can update your phone numbers with important individuals or doctors or what have you. If you do have to change your phone number, hopefully you don't have to get to that point. However, realize too that maybe this is a caregiver, so someone that you trusted, and you've since fired them because of inappropriate actions or concerns. You can still then block their phone numbers directly from your phone. And then you want to make sure that you're contacting your family and friends, your financial institutions, your utilities, what have you, your family and friends, because even if it was a caregiver or somebody who might have been acting inappropriately, you want to make sure now that your neighbors or the people that you trust know, hey, this person's no longer allowed here. They're not allowed here on my property, in my home, what have you. And then, reasons you want to contact your financial institution or your utilities, and as well as, living facilities, medical personnel, all other accounts. It really depends on what was accessed by that person. So if you happen to live in a 55 and older community, and you know that this caregiver was maybe caregiving for someone else in the building as well, you want to make sure that that other person knows, hey, look, you might want to watch out for these things, right? So it talks similar to the video that Matt had shown. is that, if something happens, although it may be embarrassing, we want to make sure that you're talking about it so that other people realize that there is something that they need to watch out for as well. There's red flags, so that they're not feeling alone, just like you may have been. Maybe they were previously a victim and didn't say anything, and now you've become a victim. So just things to consider. And then the reason that we say all other accounts and the utilities and medical personnel, we want to make sure that they didn't add themselves to your accounts in any fashion. So emails, similar concept. You can block emails, you can change your email, you can update emails if necessary. And then again, same thing. You want to be contacting those family and friends, your financial institutions, your utilities, everyone that essentially that may be utilizing your email. We want to make sure it's actually your email and not something that's been changed to someone else's email. If it's a computer fraud, you want to make sure that you're resetting the PIN or password for your computer. You want to make sure that you're using a camera cover. So I actually have a camera cover on my computer currently, and it's something that, so if you can't see me, if I open it back up, you can see me. So it's very, very simple. They're very inexpensive. You can actually, if we were live in person, I'd be giving you guys some, because that's one thing that I think is very, very important. But you also want to then make sure you're contacting a secure IT company. Something like there's a box store that has, what do they call it? The Geek Squad, something like that. I know a lot of smaller municipalities and what have you sometimes have an actual small computer IT company in their communities, and you can certainly go to them to try to make sure that your computer doesn't have any malware or what have you on it. You can also determine if there's been a compromised account. How do you change that account? How do you delete the original account and create a new one, or change those passwords? So if it's an in-person fraud, we want to make sure we're determining the location, like the picture shows here. Like, is there a physical address? What was lost or what was granted access to, and then determine what was actually stolen. So if there is property missing from a home, and they think that it's a family member that had taken it, or it's a caregiver that may have taken that property, we want to make sure that you have an idea of what was there and what was lost. It actually goes back to a lot of the insurance aspects. I know that when you do homeowners insurance or renters insurance, they say, hey, look, make a list of everything you own. Well, that's really, really difficult, but sometimes people actually just take a video camera, or like a camera on your phone, and just kind of walk through the house so that you can see what appliances do you have, what electronic equipment, do you have a laptop, do you have a tablet, do you have other items of those factors. But then also, like the electronics especially, does it have a serial number on it? And if so, you want to keep a list of those, just like you would keep a list of all your credit cards and the account numbers that are on them, and the phone number to call in case that card has been lost or stolen. If it's an in-person fraud, you also need to discuss where does that incident need to be reported? Who's going to make that report and who's assisting in reporting those statements. So if it's a general theft, typically you're going to go to law enforcement. If it's a theft that includes more than just physical items, whether it's property, assets, bank account information, ID, those types of things. In addition to law enforcement, you're going to want to be talking to Adult Protective Services. You're going to want to potentially be reporting it to the FTC, or different aspects of what was taken and how it was taken. And then who can help you, right? So in addition, if you're trying to make a report to Adult Protective Services, your local Aging and Disability Resource Center might be able to help you make that report. Or if it's a matter of, you're too upset to make a report that your caregiver has stolen from you. So maybe you've designated your son or your daughter to help you make that report. So you want to know that in advance of anything occurring, because you don't want to have to struggle in the moment to get over any type of embarrassment that you have or shame that you have. It's a matter of, I know that, my 35-year-old son is going to be able to help me in this regard. So although I'm embarrassed about what happened, I need to make sure I talk to him and tell him what the caregiver did, so that he can help produce these reports or report this to law enforcement. So who can be trusted? right? We need to figure out for you, every scenario is going to be different, right? Maybe you don't have any children. Maybe you would prefer a sibling versus your children. You know, who can be trusted in your most inner circle, right? But realize that you have to be cautious. You want to make sure, you know, that you have more than one trusted individual, because if the person that you've chosen starts struggling or is not handling things like you think they should be, you need to have someone else to go to immediately without having to be concerned about, okay, now I don't trust them, who else can I trust? And so you also want to make sure that you have a safety plan in place if something were to happen, and realize that there's an option that if someone you know and trust has violated you in some fashion, that there also is restraining orders in which can be utilized if necessary. So if a caregiver has started stealing from you and you fired them, but they keep coming around, there's actually an individual at risk restraining order that can occur and have to be filed to essentially get them to stop coming to your residence. So that's an option too. It's a bit more extreme option, but it certainly is an option if the matters require it. So other things that you can do is you can change account numbers, make sure that, again, you have that safety plan implementation, and then you have the secondary contact information, meaning that secondary trusted individual that you believe that you can reach out to in an emergency or in an instance in which you don't feel completely comfortable going to the first. And then, you know, once you decide who that person is, you're going to want to make sure you can determine where the incident might need to be reported, whether that's law enforcement, Child Protective Services, the FTC, you know, just depending on what it is, and then who's going to make that report. How to report. Just checking the time here, make sure we're good. All right. So first and foremost, if you've been victimized, there's a number of different things you need to do. If it is financially related, your first call should not be law enforcement. And I hate to say that, but it really shouldn't be. If it's a financially related crime, you need to call your financial institution and you need to let them know immediately. You know, they may be able to help you change over your accounts if necessary. They may be able to just kind of help you through, like, hey, look, for the next period of time, you know, whether that's 2 weeks or a month until you kind of get situated, you know, we're going to let all of your normal checks come through, your mortgage, your utilities, what have you. But if we see something out of the ordinary, we're going to call you, make sure it's good before we actually will accept this check. Or whatever the circumstances are, whatever you work out with your financial institution, you want to make sure if it's a financially motivated crime that you are contacting your financial institution first. And then we also need to contact other aspects depending on what it is. If you're not sure if a crime has been committed, but you think that something's not quite right, you can certainly contact the credit bureaus. I'm glad to hear from Chris that extension of the free credit reports every week has actually been extended to December 2023. This is the first I'm hearing of that, so that's great. And you can request that from all three of those credit bureaus that the FTC resources had provided earlier. If it's an ID theft, certainly go to the Federal Trade Commission. If it's an internet-based crime, meaning something similar to the gentleman in the video that Matt had shown, that would be actually also reported to the IC3, the Internet Crime Complaint Center. And then you also want to make sure that you are aware that Adult Protective Services is in every county in the state. So if you are not sure if a crime has been committed, but you want somebody to help look out after your neighbor or your mom or your daughter or whomever, if there is a concern, Adult Protective Services can be contacted, and you don't have to prove that a crime has been committed before you're contacting them. You're just contacting them to say, hey, look, I think this person might need some assistance or some services that are available within the county, and I don't know how to make that happen. So I'm going to call Adult Protective Services and let them do their thing and essentially offer the assistance to that individual if they're willing to accept it. And then again, if a crime has been committed, you also want to contact one. So in regards to reporting, I'm not sure if Chris and Matt had gone through these numbers, but I'm going to go through them reporting wise, elder abuse occurs in 1 in 23 cases. So out of the 23 cases, only 1 is reported. However, in elder financial abuse, it's actually 1 in 44 cases that is actually reported. And that's really important to realize, because if you think about all the scams that are reported, earlier the FTC mentioned that they had 130 million in crypto reports alone that were reported to the FTC just last year. If that's only a portion, maybe 1 in 23 or 1 in 44 that's actually being reported, think about how big that number actually is if people were to actually report everything, right? So people, I think, sometimes are too embarrassed or ashamed to report. And that's where we want people to talk. We want people to understand that they shouldn't be ashamed, that they shouldn't be embarrassed, that they are not the only ones out there that this is happening to. And therefore, we want them to talk about it with their neighbors and their friends and their coworkers and what have you, and get it reported, so that we can have better numbers to go off of and explain to people what is actually occurring. I will tell you that there is other studies out there that indicate, though, for reporting, that older adults are actually more likely to report fraud attempts if they haven't lost any money. 94% of older adults will report it if they haven't lost any money, but that number drops significantly if they have lost money. And just as a thought process, if you want to throw it in the chat or question and answer as to why you think that might be, I can certainly tell you my opinion, but I think a lot of older adults consider themselves to be at risk of losing their independence if they tell their family that they've been victimized. And really, because they're afraid that somebody's going to say, well, you can't handle your finances anymore, or if you can't handle your finances, maybe you shouldn't be driving, or those types of things. And I think older adults really get concerned about those aspects. So how to assist in reporting? First of all, if you find out that you're being victimized, if at all possible, break off all contact with that fraudster. If it's a caregiver, find another facility, or another agency that can help with bringing someone in, if that's the case. If it is with a child of yours, an adult child, that's going to be really, really difficult, but you need to find another family member or another trusted individual that you can rely on to help do whatever it is that person is doing. So if they're taking you to your doctor's appointments, or if they're taking you to go get groceries, or whatever the case may be, making sure that you have a backup, making sure that you have someone else that you can rely on, more than just the one person that may be defrauding you. Making sure that you're telling your financial institution right away, because there are times in which you want to make sure, again, that your financial institution knows who has the authority on your account, making sure that has not changed, that nobody else has taken liberties with your accounts. And then the rest of these we've already talked about. The number listed here next to the Adult Protective Services is actually the state of Wisconsin Elder Abuse Hotline. And Tiffany, did you have a question?
We have a comment.
Okay.
There is more shame and blame when there is an actual loss, so it makes sense would feel more comfortable in reporting fraud attempts when there is no loss.
Correct. I would absolutely agree with you. And I just realized we are short on time, so I'm going to try to get through the rest of this quickly. So just some of the best practices: make sure that you, if you're not currently, looking to buy a house or a car, what have you, freeze your credit, right? It's the credit fraud alert that Chris was talking about. It only lasts a year. If you freeze your credit, it's indefinitely. It stays frozen until or unless you unfreeze it. Making sure that you set up your Social Security Administration account before retirement, so you can actually set up an SSA My account at any time after you turn 18. So you want to do that as soon as possible. Making sure that you have documents, right? Power of attorney documents for finances, for healthcare, maybe a living will, last will and testament with personal representative identified. Those are really all great practices to have. Obviously, we talked about this earlier. And then you'll get the slides, but that way you have the phone numbers and the emails, the phone numbers and the websites as well. This is the picture of what it should look like when you go to create your My Social Security account. And then if you choose to do a power of attorney, these are just some of the things that I would ask you to take into consideration. Specifically, identify who you want as your agent and make sure you have a successor agent identified. So if the first person does not do well by you, you have someone else that can take over immediately. Because there's a number of different options, especially in the state of Wisconsin, you can actually identify in your power of attorney if at some point you decide you want to support a decision maker, a guardian, successor guardian, a rep payee for your Social Security benefits or your VA benefits, you can actually identify all those people in your power of attorney document. And I would truthfully suggest that they not all be the same person, right? They could be, but you really want to have a support system set up so that multiple people have multiple eyes on you and your assets. And just so you're aware, you could also block fiduciaries as necessary. So if you know you love your son dearly and you can't stand his wife, which would be your daughter-in-law, you can actually say in your power of attorney, I do not want this person to be a fiduciary of mine. You have that ability. And then you can also decide in your power of attorney how much and how often gifting is appropriate and or payments for services. So if you typically give all of your grandchildren $50 or $100 every Christmas and every birthday, you would actually want to put that right in your power of attorney. You know, all grandchildren between the ages of birth and 18 get, you know, whatever that dollar amount is for birthdays and Christmas every year. And, you know, same thing for payments of services. If you want to authorize your son or daughter to be able to, you know, take gas money or what have you, or take you to the doctor or what have you, then, you know, you would say, hey, look, you know, either every time they take me to the doctor or once a month, you know, if they've taken me to the doctor more than 3 times, you know, I would, you know, authorize them to take $100 out or whatever the case may be. And then this last one is really the important one. It's requiring accounting to be made at least annually, preferably twice a year, to yourself and another trusted individual. And the reason that's important is because obviously you yourself want to know what's going on if you have someone working as your power of attorney. But secondly, you want to make sure that you have somebody else identified so that if you have a durable power of attorney, which means that it is good after you may lose your capacity or if you get dementia or something like that, then that person is going to be responsible to this individual to give them an accounting. So if you are no longer able to understand what that accounting is or what it means, someone else will have to have eyes on it so that they're not stealing your funds. Making sure that you have financial accounts with potentially a registered agent or power of attorney, but not a joint account holder. I know a lot of people say that they go to their financial institution and they say, hey, look, it's just easier if something happens or at the time of your passing to be a joint account holder because that way they just get the money. Well, no, it actually makes it more difficult in some instances. So it really depends. If there's no fraud occurring, it may not be an issue, but it could become an issue again later on if you maybe lose the capacity to make those decisions. And now there's a joint account holder. That means that essentially that person has all the access to your funds, even if you are the only one putting money in. The easier way is actually to do a payable upon death, which just means that you can have your own checking or savings account and you fill out, it's generally a half-page document and it just says, okay, if at some point in the future I pass, which is going to happen to all of us, you know, the contents of what's left in my account would go to, you know, John Doe or Susie Q or whoever you identify, whether that's your current power of attorney, whether that's your child, your grandchildren, whomever. And then you can do the same thing for deeds or property as a transfer upon death. But typically joint account holders are not a good idea. Just as a quick clarification as to why that might also be an option is because if say you have a joint account with your son because you know he's your power of attorney, the problem becomes is what if your son now is getting divorced? If it's a joint account, technically he is able to access all the funds in those accounts. So his potential soon-to-be ex-wife could actually say, hey, look, he's got an account with his mom, and I am owed half of everything that account as part of the divorce decree. So that's something that you need to make sure you're aware of. And then making sure that you have a trusted or emergency contact on all your instruments, all your financial accounts, investment accounts, payment accounts, everything. So And these are just some of the other things, and you'll get the slides here. I know we're running really, really short on time. So camera covers, written address books, ways to discard your PII or personally identifying information, shredder, ink blotter, burn bag. If you have a fire pit in your backyard, that's also another way to do it. But does anybody have any questions out there? I'm going to get to my contact information here because I know we're running short here. Tiffany, are there any other questions or comments that we need to be addressing? I want to be respectful of everybody's time here as well.
We don't have any questions at this time. If anybody has a last minute question, feel free to share it in the Q&A box and I'll get it to April. Otherwise, you can reach out directly to April too. I'm sure she'd love to hear from anybody with questions or concerns.
There's my contact information. And like I said, I actually sent a copy of these slides to Mike in PDF form. So if that's something, I don't know if you guys are sharing these or not, but there's some other options in there as to resources available as well.
It doesn't look like we're getting any other questions, April. So thank you for sharing with us. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you for participating in today's conference. Please remember to complete the survey when you receive it, and we'll see you next Friday, October 21st at 10 a.m. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me.